Welcome to Deep Root Connections, a place where earth, animals, nature, and spirit are all alive, intertwined, and communicating. I'm your host, Kara Daniels, and today I want to share with you an experience I had last week. Last week, I had to put down two of my goat friends. Many of you have already listened and become acquainted with Bo. He shared some messages with us in my last episode about what it's like to be in the transition phase. Well, I have to say that he transitioned very peacefully this last Saturday. And so many different things kind of popped up through this experience that I want to share with you. It was kind of incredible, and I'm still honestly processing a little bit of it, but I'll try and articulate it as best as I can. But I want to prelude that even though we are going to be talking about the death of two of my goats, this is not a sad episode. In fact, I think it really shines light on how animals, or at least how some animals, feel and experience emotionally when they are in the transition phase. So let's dive in. But I'm going to start with my first goat, Watson, to kind of give you a little bit of backstory and what led up to Saturday. For the longest time, for about 6 months, I have felt that Bo and Watson were going to transition at about the same time. I, at one point, thought that they would be going together on the same day. And so that's been on my radar. Um, Watson had some very severe injuries that we were kind of babying him through, arthritis. He did not feel very good, and he was becoming very uncomfortable. And at the same time, Bo developed a very large tumor on his throat. And unfortunately, they couldn't do surgery. It was kind of just a watch and wait to see how fast it would grow kind of situation. Well, throughout the summer, both of the goats they were doing okay. They were doing all right. And Watson specifically told me that he did not want to go through another winter. He did not want to be cold. And so he said, when it starts to get cold, I will make my leave. Well, it froze 2 times, 2 nights in a row. And after that, he really started to decline. I think it was like a 3-day window after it froze. Watson really went from doing okay to I'm ready to go because it's getting cold. And he just did not do well in winter. And so when it was time for Watson to depart, I spent the whole day with him. It was lovely. Honestly, he ate a few sunflowers and he just gave me so much comfort. He didn't really speak to me or share any messages other than that today was the day and he was at peace. And so when he transitioned, I gave the rest of the animals some time to say goodbye. And Harold, my younger goat, walked right by him. No big deal. He smelled him and was totally cool. Was like, okay, that happened. I'm going to go eat my dinner now. My horse took a few moments to say his goodbyes. And then Bo, he did not want to approach Watson. He kind of looked from afar, and I could feel such heaviness in his heart, almost like he didn't quite expect it to happen that day, even though I had been trying to communicate with him. It was really actually pretty heartbreaking to see. But I told my sister-in-law, I said, I'm pretty sure Bo's timeline just jumped forward. I think we're probably looking at a few days now. I don't know. But I just have a feeling. I just have a feeling it's close. Even though he was doing okay up until that point, I just, those feelings you get. Well, after Watson was taken and cremated, I visibly saw the tumor on Bo's neck exponentially grow. I think it tripled in size. And so, let's see, Watson went down on Tuesday. On that Saturday, I made the call for Bo, and he told me it was absolutely okay. He was ready. He wanted to go really close to Watson, and they had this whole thing planned out. But what was really interesting, and this is a first for me, and I feel like I'm still processing everything, is Watson really, really took me down. I just was so deeply connected to him. And so I was in the process of grieving him. And then it's Bo's turn, and it was a completely different story. Not that I didn't dearly love him. He and I were really good friends and very deeply connected, but he was not about to let me grieve, even though I tried really, really hard to. I called the vet. I spent the whole day with Bo, and he was just so lighthearted. He was wandering around and eating little snackies. But when the vet came, I looked at him, and he just zeroed in on me with his big goat eyes, and his ears were straight forward. And he knew that we were making the decisions. And so when the vet walked away to give me some time, I looked at him and I just got that ugly cry face. And I was like, this is going to be so hard. And he just looked at me, and he walked over to this blanket that I had laid out for him. It was a blanket that my grandmother made. It's pretty worn and tattered, but it was a family blanket, and I thought it would be nice to wrap him up in it after he had transitioned. He goes over to this blanket and grabs it with his mouth and drags it. And he says, "This looks pretty comfortable." And I just looked at him. That blanket has been there for a while, like at least a couple of weeks, and he has not once even gone over to smell it. And so he goes over there and grabs the blanket and says it looks pretty comfortable. And I just was like, no, that didn't happen. But it did. And so that was kind of the beginning of him just keeping the mood really light. And so I am going to go into detail about how he transitioned. So if this is a sensitive area for you, I mean, please feel free to skip it. I totally understand. Um, but I just feel like I should share this anyways. So the vet came forward and she sedated him. But because of where his tumor was, we had to do this in the muscle. We couldn't use a vein. And so she warned us it would take him a few minutes to actually lay down. And so the whole time he's up, he's kind of getting a little wobbly. And I hear him say, "Oh, this is what it feels like to be drunk. This is really cool." And I'm like, "What? I'm sorry. I'm really trying hard to hold space for you and like make sure you don't run into anything. And you're sitting here making jokes." I just couldn't believe it at all. And so eventually he did lay down, and it was so fast. I mean, he was definitely ready to go, and he transitioned beautifully, really, truly beautifully. Um, and so after he had popped out of his body, and I kind of just want to pause here and share what animals have shown me or described when they die, get euthanized. It doesn't really matter how they transition. But what they share with me is that they just kind of pop out of their body. It's usually through their crown of their head. And they have a cord, a life cord, and the life cord kind of dissolves, and that energy goes back into their spirit. And when that life cord is no longer connected, that's when they actually transition. But they always describe it as uh, expansion. A lot of them say it's like ecstasy. It's feels so good because they get to be out of the physical body. They're never in pain, and it's just like they can stay or they can like go and cross over really quickly. It's definitely up to them. But he was just popped out of his body and was floating above it for just a few moments. And he watched while we wrapped him up in the blanket. And he looked, or I guess he brought my attention to our horse trailer, which is what we were going to be using to transport him to the cremation woman. So he looks over or brings my attention to the trailer and he says, "Oh, is that my ride? I've always wondered what it was like to ride in that." And so I'm laying on his body and I just feel so much peace. And then he's making more jokes. And it was just one of those experiences where it's like this, I guess not all deaths have to be sad. I truly, this one was just so beautiful and he made it so lighthearted that I couldn't even grieve or be sad even if I wanted to, which I thank him very much for because it would have been hard if he was pretty if he was quiet, it would have been a lot harder for me. But after we wrapped him up, I could feel that his spirit had left. And I let the other animals in, the remaining two, my horse and my goat, so they could say their goodbyes. And the horse goes over, he says his goodbyes, and then he leaves. And this horse, I'll tell you, has seen a lot of death in his life, so I'm not surprised that it didn't take him long to say goodbye. But Harold is my last goat. He's younger, in really good health, and now he's the only goat. And he was very deeply connected with Bo. And so he goes over and lays down next to Bo and stays there for about an hour, just laying there. And I didn't want to interrupt him while he was having his moment, so I gave him some space. But I asked him yesterday what he was doing specifically, if he would be willing to share kind of energetically, emotionally, what was happening in those moments. And he said he was untangling his cords so the grieving process would be easier. And he showed me kind of his heart and Bo's heart. Oh, kind of like a ball of yarn, a lot of different cords of energy entangled together. And he said, I need to bring my cords back. And so I just see this like tangled ball of yarn or energy cords slowly separating and energy going back to Harold and energy going back to Bo. And he says, when animals die and we're intimately connected, we have to untangle the cords. It's the best thing that we can do to help them go into the light with ease and grace. And so I don't carry his energy with me. And so he said it took about an hour to do that. And then he was okay. I mean, he is still grieving. He still does have a pretty heavy heart, but he says the grieving process is a lot more complicated if you are holding on to their energy. And he says, I wouldn't want to do that. And I thought that was really interesting because I didn't know about energy cords. I didn't know really anything when I began learning animal communication. You know, when they teach you animal communication, they say send a cord of love or a bubble of love, but nobody really talks about what an energy cord is or how that all works. But kind of through some reflection and hindsight, I thought about another time that I witnessed something very similar. And let's see, in one of my previous episodes, I shared with you how my horse died. It was not sudden, it was not unexpected, but Watson, my goat, the first one that we had to say goodbye to, he was really good friends with this horse. And so when he died, my horse, I didn't give any of the other herd members time to say goodbye. It was kind of a complicated situation. And so nobody got to formally say goodbye. But what happened was after Foolish's body was removed, for about a week, I noticed that Watson would go over to the specific location my horse transitioned in, and he would lay there for hours. And that was pretty unusual. Watson was not one to just lay down or lay down for hours. And I was watching him do this through the window. I didn't want to interrupt. I felt like something was going on. I didn't know what, and I didn't have the communication skills at that point in time to ask. But what I learned from other communicators that I've worked with and kind of now watching what happened with Harold, Watson was laying down in that specific location because the essence and imprint of what happened was still there and it was lingering in the soil. And so that was one way Watson could actually connect in with Foolish's energy and the transition phase by laying in that exact spot. And he said, I'm untangling my cords. And he shared that he basically did the exact same thing that Harold did, only he didn't have the physical body to do it with. He just had the imprint and essence of that location. And it took him it took him a while and they were very, very closely bonded. And so I just thought that was really interesting how how the animals are untangling their cords after one of their family members transitions and how for people that's not something that we're really taught or are even aware of is to untangle the cords. Now, I have had enough death in my life to know that untangling the cords when you're ready to can definitely help the grieving process. But I don't want to get sidetracked here. There's more to all of this that I want to share. So, fast forwarding or jumping back into um, Bo when he transitioned. So, he's making this extremely lighthearted. Harold's cutting cords. And when it was time to go, I got the horse trailer ready and we were trying to put him in the horse trailer so we could take him to be cremated. And the coolest thing happened. So, as somebody who regularly communicates with trees, you might be surprised to hear that I don't regularly talk to my trees on my property. Like we have a relationship. I say hi. I think they're beautiful, but we don't generally sit together and have conversations or anything like that. So what was really inspiring was when my horse trailer's door, when I was trying to load Bo up, the horse trailer's door kept trying to shut, kept trying to shut, kept trying to shut. And I didn't have anything to kind of put in the way. to keep the door open. And all of a sudden, this little skinny branch comes into my awareness, and this branch of this maple tree was kind of wrapped around my horse trailer door. And I heard in my mind, I can do it. I can do it. I can hold it. Just grab my branch. Okay, so I grabbed the branch, and this was a really skinny branch, and that horse trailer door is so heavy, but I could feel the tree like tightening up her energy, like to give her little branch more strength. And so I put her little branch there, and she held the door for me. We loaded up Bo, and when I shut the door, I looked at the tree and I said, "Thank you." And I could feel her energy withdraw. It withdrew straight into her core. And then I could feel her energy shooting straight up out of her crown. Not like she's leaving her body, but she's sending energy out the top of her crown through all of her branches. And that's when I start to hear music. It's like almost like she was singing a song. It sounded, it's very hard to explain, but it was angelic, but felt earthy, kind of like a chorus. I don't really have words to describe the music that she was sharing, but I heard her start to sing. And then I heard there's about four pine trees, ponderosa pines, that live just kind of on the outside of my property. And I heard them starting to sing too. And what was really incredible was that she had a very feminine, soft, angelic voice. And they all have very masculine energy. And so they kind of brought in a lower tempo. And the harmonics were beautiful, absolutely incredible. And it kind of just felt like a blanket of comfort was being placed over my entire space, my other animals, my barn, my pasture, all of these trees that were singing witnessed both of my goats dying, and they watch kind of the coming and goings of our day-to-day lives. And so I was just honored that they would bring that into my awareness. And then once everything sort of settled and I could emotionally tap in to see and or get more information, I asked the maple what exactly that was. I had never heard trees singing like that before. I've never heard music from trees. This was definitely my first time. And she said that she was singing a morning song, a song to help with the transition of both goats, to help ease the grief and imprint of death on the property. She said that the music was kind of neutralizing and healing. She said it was a mourning song in their honor to send them off with love and grace. And yeah, it was just absolutely amazing. And now this tree, this tree that I have ignored for 5 years is, gosh, she's so precious. And the pines, they just, what an experience. I'm very thankful for that. And I know other people hear music from trees, and I will ask the trees more about it and more about their music and their songs and how we as people can kind of tune into that with intention and more frequently. So if you're wanting to hear the music of the trees, I'll go ask them if they have tips for us. But the last thing that she said was that the song was the song of the universe, one of many songs, but she says it's one of the songs of the universe, and it travels on the frequency of love. And what she showed me was kind of like this this network, very much like the mycelium network below ground, only a mycelium network of energy that we just exist in. We walk through it constantly, whether we are aware of it or not. And all of the song frequencies that they were singing were just traveling all across the mycelium network of above ground. I have no idea how to explain this, but but basically like this web of energy in the love frequency is like all of this energy was shooting around intentionally. And I'm going to learn more about this. I will ask more. I will ask more about this web of love blanket we live in, how we can tune into it more. But I just wanted to share kind of an incredible story of my last week. It's been wild, and everybody on the property seems to be doing generally okay. But I would be curious if you have ever heard the trees sing or heard music coming from somewhere but couldn't quite place it. I definitely want to learn more about it, and I hope to share more about that with you as well. So, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.